Hi, welcome to week 3. We are going to look at the code for graphics. Now, some of it will need an explanation on paper. It's easier to explain some stuff on paper, and I'll switch between writing code and encouraging you to write code, and also for you to grasp the concepts here. The very first thing you need to do is you need to get the graphics py file, which is there's a link to it in the Moodle page, near the top of the Moodle page under software. You can alternatively Google graphics ZELLE, and you can find the file. And what you want to do is, once you locate this file, you download it into a folder where your other code will live. Make sure it sits in the same folder as all your other code. Okay, so the graphics is in there and the other code for week 3. Then it's easy for your code to find the file. So let's start. Let's go over and have a look at Paizo. So I've got a Paizo environment. Let me just close that down. Okay, the very first thing I want to do, and the most important thing to do here, is if you have temp1, you need to save your file, because this now is going to require us to link files together in what we are doing. That'll make more sense. Let's save it. Now, as I said before, the location you want to save it, I've got a PyCharm project folder. See if I can open it up so you can see it. I don't know if you can see it, but in my PyCharm folder, in my Python I have my graphics file in there. Oops, don't click it because you'll rename this file as graphics. So if I call this week 3, the Python file I'm going to work on now needs to have the graphics file in the same folder. Okay, so ignore that. So now I've saved this file. If I can just show you my folder structure, have a look here. Okay, this is Mac, but essentially it's the same concept. There is my graphics file, and there is my code I'm going to use the graphics file with. They're all in the same folder. So that's the very first thing to do. Now, once that's all in place and the files are all sitting together happily, you can then come to your week 3 Python file. And there's two things. What you want to do is you want to make a link. You want to import. Let's put a reference in. You either want to import or link, depending on what makes sense to you, right? The language, the graphics library. Right, so that's the very first thing. There are two ways of doing it. The first way is you write from graphics import asterisk. That's one way to do it. Another way, if that doesn't work, and I'll just put a comment here, is you can just type in import graphics. Okay, so if this one works, and you'll see the errors in the code and you'll know if it works, okay? But if that one doesn't work, then comment that one out, grab the import graphics one, and use that one instead. Okay, so both of these lines are two ways of importing or linking the graphics library, because we are going to use the graphics library. Let's right click, run our file as script, see if there's an issue over here. There's no issue. So it's got no problem with import graphics. Now that suggests that I've got a link to it in my folder, right? That I can see it in my file, so I can use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this all as simple functions. And the very first thing we're going to do is create what we call a basic function to start your program. I'm going to define it as main. Okay. Now the reason I'm doing this, and this isn't in your lecture notes, but the reason I'm doing this is you will see how I organize my code. Whenever you think about programming, think of when you run a program, it always starts in the program at a particular location, and then it runs from that point. In most cases, it's a main function. Okay. So that's all I'll say about that, but watch what I'll do. Okay, so what I'm going to, first act I want to do is this. So let's just draw it first. Let's go back to our drawing thing here. So the very first thing I need to do is actually draw a window which is going to pop up a user interface, right? So something like a graphical user interface. It may be a stretch calling it a graphical user interface because it's not the easiest technology to work with. I want to create one of these. I want to run it and pop that up on my screen. So how do I do that? Well, what I do is inside my main, I say I want a window. I'm going to call it win, and I'm going to run a function from the graphics file, and the graphics file function is called, let's just type it in correctly, not that one, graph win. Did you see something there? No, graph win. I don't think I've actually got a link to it, so give me a second. Right, graphics dot, it should be in this, there it is, graph win. Now let me just explain to you what I've done and what the issue is here. There are two issues in what's just happened in front of you. This bit's okay. This bit I'm not happy with. But this bit, this graph win, is the crucial element. What graph win does, graph capital G, capital W, is it actually runs a bit of code which creates this window on screen. I think the default is 200 by 200, but we'll check that in a minute. Okay, so graph win is the bit of code that creates this window, right? So let's go back to the code. So that's that bit. But this bit I don't like, because if I'm importing it, why am I having to write it again here? So there are several issues here, but what I'm going to try to do is switch from import graphics. Let's get rid of that one, and let's get the other one back and see whether that is happier, that I can just get rid of this bit here, because all I want to be able to write is that. That's all I need to do, that line, and I will pop on screen a little window. Okay, let's see if it's happy. We go right click, we run it as script, and if there's any issue, it's going to throw a red remark here and say things like, I don't know what graph win is, or graph win's a problem, or I cannot import the graphics, and so on. It's going to do all that, but it's not on my case. In your case, it might. So consider switching between these two and which one doesn't have a problem. So now that I've run it as script, let's grab the main, go back here, over here, and let's run it. Hit enter, and I need to click on it so you can see it. There it is. There it is. That little window is a 200 by 200 window, and that has popped up on screen because of this line here. Okay, so now what we really ought to do is close the window. Now some of you are going to have this problem when you hit the red. Some of you will have errors appear here, but don't worry about those for the time being. They're not going to be a big problem. So that's a simple line of code which will pop up that screen in front of you. So that's our very first thing we want to do. And what I'll do is I'll break the videos down. So I'm going to stop this one at this point. Make sure that you're happy with this before we move on to creating points and drawing stuff on that screen, which will be the next step we do. And then after that, we're going to create a circle and see how that works.